She just pushed 3 human beings into the world, and the first thing her husband said when he walked through that door was not "I love you." It was not "you are incredible." It was not even "thank you." No. Sun Kai Park, heir to the most dangerous Korean crime syndicate east of Seoul, stood at the foot of that hospital bed, looked at the woman who had nearly shattered her body to give him 3 sons, and he curled his lip like she was something he had accidentally stepped in. "Your ruined body makes me vomit." 3 days. She was 3 days postpartum. Now, before you say a word, before you even breathe, I need you to understand something. Tara did not cry, not in front of him. Not one single tear fell from those dark, devastating eyes while he was in that room. Because here's what Sun Kai did not know, what nobody in that building knew, what nobody in Washington, D.C. would know for exactly 7 more days. Tara had not spent 9 months just growing babies. She had spent 9 months building a bomb. And Sun Kai Park had just lit the fuse himself. Stay with me. Because this story does not end in that hospital room. It ends at a penthouse gala with a broken man on his knees and a woman in emerald green standing over everything he used to own. The private wing of the D.C. Medical Center smelled of antiseptic and white lilies. White lilies. Tara had noticed that the moment they wheeled her in, the flowers had been Mrs. Park's arrangement, not a congratulations, a decoration. The same way you dress a room before a transaction closes, sterile, deliberate, bloodless. Tara sat on the edge of the hospital bed now, her back straight despite every nerve in her body screaming at her to lie down. Her deep brown skin carried the faint gleam of exhaustion, the kind that settles in the bones after something extraordinary and terrible has happened at the same time. Her hair, usually in a precise low bun that meant business, was pulled back loose, wild at the temples. She had not slept in 31 hours. She had delivered 3 boys in a span of 47 minutes, and her body carried every single second of that miracle in ways that a silk hospital gown could not hide. She did not try to hide it. She held the middle son against her chest, his small, warm weight the only real thing in the room. The triplets' monitors beeped steadily in a row beside her, 3 green lines, 3 heartbeats. The most valuable thing Sun Kai Park had ever produced, and he had not touched a single one of them yet. Tara's eyes were on the door. She heard him before she saw him, the unhurried click of Italian leather on polished hospital floors. The quiet part of Sun Kai Park, the part that frightened people, was never the noise he made. It was the stillness he carried, the way a room seemed to hold its breath around him, the way even the air understood that it needed to get out of his way. He was beautiful. She had thought so the first time she saw him across a conference table in Seoul, his neck tattoo, a delicate vine of leaves crawling toward his jaw, the one crack in his otherwise immaculate surface. He was still beautiful now. That was the terrible thing. He stepped into the doorway in a black suit sharp enough to cut glass, our silver earring catching the light, jaw set, eyes scanning the room with that cool, acquisitive intelligence she had once mistaken for depth. He did not look at his sons. His gaze found Tara, and it moved across her body the way an accountant reviews a depreciated asset. Slow, clinical, arriving at a number that disappointed him. The silence before he spoke lasted 4 full seconds. Tara counted them. Then, Sun Kai's mouth opened, and the man who had whispered forever, queen into her ear during the 2nd trimester, the man who had pressed his lips to her temple the night the heartbeats first appeared on the ultrasound screen. That man looked at the mother of his children and said, "I spent millions on your maintenance, Tara. But look at you. Your ruined body makes me vomit. You are no longer the trophy I purchased." Purchased. The word landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Tara felt it ripple through her chest, her arms, down into the hands that held her son, but not a single ripple showed on her face. Her expression did not shift. Her breath did not catch. The only change was something microscopic, a slight, almost imperceptible stillness at the corner of her mouth, the stillness of a woman who had already planned for this exact sentence, who had written it down in a private document 6 months ago and titled it Exhibit A. She had known since the 3rd month when Mrs. Park's lawyer had begun quietly requesting copies of Tara's prenuptial terms. She had known since the 5th month when Sun Kai stopped coming to the house before midnight. She had known since the 7th month when she intercepted a text between mother and son, 2 words, after delivery. She had known exactly what she was to them, and she had used every single day of knowing to prepare accordingly. The door behind Sun Ki opened wider. His mother, Mrs. Park, a woman who wore her silk hanbok like armor and her smile like a concealed blade, stepped into the room with the practiced ease of someone who had choreographed this moment in her mind 100 times. She was elegant in the way that certain dangerous things are elegant. Her silver-streaked hair was coiled perfectly. Her posture was the posture of a woman who believed the room belonged to her. Her eyes went to the babies, and something hungry and proprietary moved across her face. Then her eyes moved to Tara, and the hunger became contempt. "We have no further use for the foreigner," she said, her voice soft as a blade drawn slowly from its sheath. "Secure the nursery. Flush the rest." Tara did not blink. Sun Ki moved to the small table beside the bed. He reached into the interior pocket of his jacket and withdrew a folded document, crisp, white, already tabbed for signature, and set it on the edge of the mattress near Tara's knee. "The way you set a receipt next to a purchase you are returning. Divorce papers, 72 hours postpartum." He set a pen on top of them. Tara looked at the pen, looked at the papers. Then she looked up at Sun Ki one time, just once, and in her dark eyes there was no devastation. There was no begging. There was something he did not recognize because he had never once bothered to look for it in her. There was calculation. Her hand reached for the pen. Her signature went down smooth and unhurried, not the signature of a woman being discarded. The signature of a woman completing a transaction she had already planned 17 steps past. Sun Ki took the papers. He straightened them against his palm, satisfied. He had no idea, not the faintest shadow of a suspicion, that the ink drying on those pages would be completely invisible in less than 6 hours. That the signed divorce documents he was about to deliver to his legal team would be blank white paper before morning. That Tara had sourced the disappearing ink from a forensic supply contact 3 months prior and had swapped the pen on that table herself 2 hours before he arrived. She had known he was coming. She had known what he would bring. She had simply made sure she was ready first. Thereafter they swept from the room, Mrs. Park's hanbok rustling like the wings of something predatory, Sun Ki's footsteps clicking back into silence. The door closed, and the private wing went absolutely still. Tara sat with her son against her chest, 3 monitors beeping, 6 tiny fists curled, 3 sets of lungs breathing. She did not allow herself to fall apart yet. She reached under the mattress with her free hand and removed a burner phone, slim, warm from her body heat, and typed 2 words into an encrypted message thread that had been active for 4 months. "Protocol. Scorched earth." The reply came back in 11 seconds. 1 word. "Ready." She powered the phone down and slid it into the folded blanket at her hip. Then she looked down at her middle son and pressed her lips to his forehead, soft and certain. "Baby," she whispered, "your father just made the most expensive mistake of his life." The hospital wing had never been loud, but after Sun Ki and Mrs. Park swept from the room, the silence that replaced them was a different animal entirely. It was not peaceful. It was not restful. It was the silence of a held breath, the kind that sits in the chest like a stone waiting for permission to drop. Tara sat still for exactly 45 seconds after the door clicked shut. She counted them. It was something she had trained herself to do years ago, back when she was 23, and sitting across interrogation tables from men twice her size, men who believed that silence was a weapon they owned. She had learned early that the person who moves first, who fills the quiet, who rushes to speak or cry or react, is always the person who loses. So she sat. She counted. She let the silence belong to her instead. Then she exhaled. She looked down at the boy in her arms, and the thing that happened next was not a performance. There was no one left in the room to perform for. What happened next was simply Tara, stripped down to the raw, unguarded truth of what she was. A woman who had given everything and been told it was garbage. The first tear fell before she could catch it. It hit the white sheet stretched across her knee, and the small dark circle it left behind undid something in her chest that she had been holding together with pure will since the moment Sun Ki's shadow had fallen across the doorway. Her jaw trembled, her throat closed, and then quietly, so quietly that the monitors almost buried it, she cried. Not the pretty cinematic kind, the kind that has no dignity to it. The kind that shakes the shoulders and burns the eyes and pulls sound from somewhere below the stomach. She cried for the girl who had believed him, because she had. That was the part that lived in the marrow of this grief, not the betrayal itself, but the fact that some warm, unguarded, foolish piece of her had taken his words during the second trimester and pressed them against her heart like something sacred. He had sat beside her in the low lamplight of their Washington townhouse and traced a single finger along the curve of her jaw and said, "You are the most extraordinary woman I have ever wanted to keep." And she, Tara, T-Baby, the forensic strategist who had dismantled 3 federal fraud cases before her 31st birthday, had believed him. She touched her son's cheek. The baby blinked, slow and unbothered by the universe. And in the particular slant of the monitor light, the amber flecks in his irises caught fire. Sun-Ki's eyes. Unmistakably, devastatingly. Sun-Ki's eyes. Tara pressed her lips together so hard they went white, because she understood in that moment the full architecture of her sentence. Every time she looked at this child for the rest of her life, some echo of the man who had called her body vomit would look back at her. There was no clean break. There was no divorce document that severed this. She was biologically tethered, through 3 small, perfect, innocent people, to the man who had treated her sacrifice like a receipt he no longer needed. She could have collapsed under that. She almost did. But then the forensic part of her brain, the part that did not feel, the part that only calculated, quietly cleared its throat. And it said, "Grief is a resource. Use it correctly." Tara took one more breath. She let it shudder. She let herself feel the full crushing weight of what had just been done to her. She memorized it. She filed it in the place in her mind where she kept her most important evidence, the place she would return to on the days when the plan felt too slow, when patience felt impossible, when the urge to simply burn everything down threatened to override precision. This feeling was the file. She reached under the mattress. The burner phone was exactly where she had placed it 6 days ago. She opened the encrypted thread. Typed 2 words, protocol, scorched earth. The reply came back in 11 seconds. Ready. She powered the phone down and picked up the legal notepad Ms. Park had left on the bedside table, the one with the Park family attorney's letterhead, left deliberately as a reminder of who held power in this arrangement. Tara turned it to the blank backside and began to write. Not frantically, not with the jagged scrawl of a panicking woman, with the clean, deliberate print of someone composing a document that would matter later. At the top of the page, she wrote one name, Mrs. Park. Beneath it, she began building a list, not of feelings, not of grievances, a list of evidence, dates, amounts, intercepted communications, the precise financial irregularities she had discovered during month 7 when boredom and brilliance had driven her to audit the Park Syndicate's charitable foundation. What she had found there was not charity. What she had found was a 40-year trail of laundered money that led eventually to a truth so explosive that even Tara had sat with it for 2 weeks before she understood what to do with it. The DNA test. Mrs. Park had demanded it, planning to use it as the final weapon, the clinical proof that Tara's children were Park heirs and Tara herself was therefore expendable. She had ordered it through her own private lab. She believed the results were under her control. She did not know that Tara had a contact inside that lab. She did not know that the sealed black envelope when it arrived would contain not just the paternity confirmation she expected, but a second result. A result that answered a question nobody had thought to ask, whether Sun-Ki was actually a Park at all. Tara finished her list. No, she folded the page into quarters and looked toward the window where the Washington, D.C. skyline glittered cold and indifferent beyond the glass. She thought about Sun-Ki's face when he had looked at her. She thought about the word purchased, and for the first time since the door had closed, Tara allowed herself something that was not grief and was not strategy. She allowed herself the quiet, diamond-cold satisfaction of knowing exactly what was coming, and knowing that Sun-Ki Park, for all his power and his silk suits and his magnificent contempt, had absolutely no idea. He thinks he ended something today, she thought. He actually just started it. The divorce papers came back blank. Sun-Ki found out on a Tuesday morning in the private office of his legal team's D.C. Dear Tower, when the lead attorney held the document up to the window light and the signatures simply were not there. Not faded, not smeared. Gone. As though Tara's hand had never touched the paper at all. Sun Kai stood at the window for a long time after the attorney delivered this information. The city spread below him in the pale morning light, gray and enormous and full of the kind of people who believed that Washington ran on politics. It did not. It ran on the same thing every city ran on: leverage. And for 29 years, Sun Ki Park had been its most elegant practitioner. He pressed one finger against the cold glass. Disappearing ink. He said it quietly enough that the attorney had to lean forward to catch it. Then Sun Ki turned. Bess and the attorney, a man who had worked for the Park family for 11 years and had seen things that kept him awake, took one involuntary step back from the expression on his employer's face. It was not rage. Rage was loud, and Sun Ki was never loud. What crossed his face was something more controlled and therefore more terrifying, the cold, focused recalibration of a man who had underestimated something and was now correcting his assessment with the precision of a surgeon removing an unexpected tumor. He had underestimated her. He would not make that mistake again. Back at the Park estate, a 4-story federal colonial in Georgetown that felt less like a home and more like an institution, Tara moved through the marble hallways with the careful, measured pace of a woman who understood that every room was being watched. This was not paranoia. This was fact. She had identified 14 cameras in the house during her first week of residence, cataloged them in a mental map she could access the way other people access breathing, and she had adjusted her behavior accordingly, not to hide, but to perform. To give Sun Ki's surveillance team exactly the image he wanted: a subdued, recovering woman, soft-footed and compliant. She played it beautifully. That same Tuesday morning, while Sun Ki stood in his attorney's office processing the ink betrayal, Tara sat in the nursery feeding the boys on a precise 90-minute rotation schedule she had established with the lactation nurse, a schedule that happened to require her to be in the nursery with the door legitimately locked between the hours of 9 and 11 a.m., the hours during which the estate's internal network experienced its lowest security traffic. The IT team went on staggered breaks. 3 of the cameras in the East Wing dropped to single-frame recording. She had timed everything to this window. Mrs. Park appeared in the nursery doorway without knocking. She never knocked. It was how the woman communicated authority, through the refusal to ask permission for anything. Mrs. Park was impeccable, as always. The hanbok today was midnight blue with silver embroidery at the cuffs, and she wore it with the posture of a woman who believed fabric had political significance. Her expression was the particular blend of warmth and contempt that Tara privately categorized as the performance of grace in front of an audience that does not actually exist. "The formula," Mrs. Park said without preamble. "I have arranged for a specialist to oversee the boys' feeding schedule going forward. You are recovering. You should rest. Translation: you are being removed from the nursery. Your body has served its purpose. We will take it from here." Tara looked up from her phone. She looked at Mrs. Park, the way she used to look at witnesses on the stand, with the calm, unhurried attention of someone who already knows the answer and is merely observing how the lie is constructed. Then she set the phone down on the nursing stool beside her, crossed her ankles, and said pleasantly, "Of course. Although before the specialist starts, you might want to speak to the head nurse. There seems to be an issue with the formula supply." Mrs. Park's eyes narrowed by precisely 2 millimeters. "What issue?" "A tracer issue," Tara said. She kept her voice mild as spring water. "About 3 weeks ago, I mixed a harmless fluorescent dye, completely food safe, I have the documentation, into the reserve formula stock. Standard forensic precaution. I was concerned about tampering. It shows up neon under UV light, on hands primarily. Whoever has been accessing the formula without authorization," she glanced toward the door, "their hands will have been stained for days." The silence in the nursery had teeth. Mrs. Park's composure held. It was genuinely impressive how well the woman had trained herself to absorb shock. But something shifted behind her eyes, something quick and cold like a calculation being revised at speed. "You are bluffing," Mrs. Park said. "Am I?" Tara said. "The UV lamp is in the second drawer of the nursing station. It has been there since last Thursday. You're welcome to check the nurse's hands before she begins her shift today." She paused. "Or I can call Sun Ki and we can do it together. I'm sure he would be very interested in knowing that someone has been accessing his heir's food supply without authorization." especially given the life insurance policies placed on all three boys last month. Mrs. Park stood in the doorway for 4 full seconds. Then, without a word, she turned and walked away. Tara listened to the sound of her footsteps recede down the marble hallway. She waited until they faded completely. Then she picked up her phone and sent a single text to a number saved under the name Dr. Reeves. The milk is secured. Moving to phase 2. The reply, a single green checkmark. Round 1. She had not raised her voice. She had not made a threat. She had simply revealed one corner of the board, just enough to communicate that she was playing a game Mrs. Park had not realized was already in progress. The Park estate at night was a different creature than it was by day. By day it moved with the choreographed efficiency of a machine that had been running long enough to forget it was a machine. By night, the house exhaled. The staff thinned, the rhythms slowed. The cameras that swept the eastern corridor ran on a 60-second delay between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., a scheduling gap that Tara had discovered during her 3rd week of residence when she had mapped the estate's security rotation the same way she once mapped financial fraud networks, patiently, methodically, waiting for the pattern to reveal itself. She was in Sun Ki's study at midnight. She had come in through the connecting bathroom that adjoined the guest suite where she had been relocated, quietly, efficiently, after delivering the triplets. She had not contested the relocation. She had in fact requested the guest suite specifically, because the guest suite shared a wall with Sun Ki's office, and walls in Tara's experience were never as solid as the people behind them believed. She moved through the dark study without a flashlight. She had memorized the room's layout during the one occasion Mrs. Park had permitted her inside it, a supervised meeting with the estate attorney during which Tara had appeared to be absorbing legal terminology while actually cataloging every surface, every object, the precise distance from the door to the desk to the carved mahogany bookshelf where Mrs. Park's family heirlooms occupied the top shelf like silent sentinels. The jade ring was there, exactly where she had noted it. A heavy antique piece carved with the Park family's traditional pattern, the kind of object that occupied a room not because it was decorative, but because it was a statement of permanence. "We were here before you," it said, "and we will be here after." Tara picked it up. She turned it over in her fingers, feeling the cool weight of it against her palm, and then she opened the tiny seam she had cut into the inner band 3 weeks ago. During the 40 seconds she had been alone in this room while the attorney stepped out to take a call. Inside the seam, smaller than a shirt button, was a listening device so compact it had taken her 2 tries to seat it correctly. It was still there, still transmitting. She set the ring back on the shelf, precisely in the slight dust outline it had left, and stood behind Sun Ki's chair in the dark, allowing herself one moment to absorb the room the way a strategist absorbs a battlefield. Sun Ki had found a camera in this office 4 days ago. He had found it because Tara had placed it where he would find it. It was a decent device, mid-range, the kind a mildly suspicious spouse might purchase without professional guidance, and she had positioned it inside the ventilation cover with just enough visibility that a thorough sweep would catch it. She had watched through the jade ring feed as Sun Ki's security team dismantled it with obvious satisfaction. Had listened to Sun Ki telling his head of security, "She is watching us," and his security chief responding, "Not anymore." The quiet confidence in both their voices. The camera they found was not the threat. The camera they found was the invitation to stop looking. She returned to the guest suite, sat on the bed, plugged the jade ring's receiver into her laptop, a machine that had no registered IP address and had never touched the estate's internal network. She pulled up 11 days of audio files and began to move through them with the focused efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. Most of it was predictable, business calls, instructions to legal teams. But then, on day 9 of the recording, there was a conversation between Sun Ki and his mother that made Tara's fingers go still above the keyboard. She played it 3 times. The first time to absorb the shock, the second time to verify she had heard correctly, the third time to begin building the strategy it required. Sun Ki's voice, clipped and low. "The ice contact has been activated. Wednesday. I want her out before the custody paperwork is finalized. No drama." Mrs. Park's voice, silken and satisfied. "And the children?" A pause. Then, "They stay." Tara sat in the dark with the audio playing on silent loop, her eyes on the middle distance, her mind already 3 moves past the revelation. They were going to use immigration enforcement to remove her from the country before the courts had time to establish her custodial rights. They were going to strip her of her children using the machinery of the state, because they could, because they had the contacts, because in their calculus she was a foreign vessel who had outlived her usefulness. She closed the laptop. She sat with her hands folded in her lap and she breathed. In, out, in, out. Then she opened the laptop again and navigated to an encrypted folder she had been quietly building since month 5. A folder she had titled with the dark precision that characterized everything she did privately. Mafia for Dummies, a federal dossier. She began to update it. Names, dates, shipping manifests, the customs codes she had decoded from the Foundation's disbursement records, the route maps she had reconstructed from 11 days of phone calls, the wire transfer network that connected 4 shell companies and 2 Korean subsidiaries to a smuggling operation that would make a federal prosecutor cry with gratitude. She worked until 3 a.m. The house slept around her. The cameras swept their patient-compromised rotations. And Sun Ki dreamed whatever cold dreams a man like Sun Kai dreamed, and Tara built the case that would bury him. Min Hee arrived on a Thursday. She came the way all of Mrs. Park's arrangements came, without announcement to Tara, with elaborate ceremony to everyone else. A black car in the circular drive at 10 a.m. The sound of Mrs. Park's voice carrying from the foyer with a warmth she never extended inside the house's ordinary hours. The click of heels on marble that had a different cadence than the estate's usual traffic. Lighter, more precise, the walk of a woman who had been trained to enter rooms as an event rather than an arrival. Tara heard all of it from the nursery. She did not go to the foyer. She did not appear curious. She continued feeding the boys on their rotation schedule, her expression serene, her hands steady. Her pulse, the only honest narrator left in her body, ticking just slightly faster than usual. She had been waiting for Min Hee for 6 weeks. The socialite's name was Min Hee Cho, and on paper, she was everything Mrs. Park had ordered. 27, from a prominent Seoul family with syndicate-adjacent business connections, educated at Oha Women's University, photographed at the right events beside the right people. She was in every visible metric the replacement, the pure, appropriate, culturally aligned successor to the damaged foreign vessel currently occupying the guest suite. Mrs. Park had been meticulous. She had not been meticulous enough. Min Hee Cho's real name was Amara Collins Cho. She had been born in Atlanta, raised in Seoul from age 9. And she had met Tara at Georgetown during their junior year over a shared forensic accounting textbook and a mutual disdain for a professor who believed that brilliance was geographically determined. They had been best friends for 11 years. Min Hee was the person who had, at Tara's request, spent 8 months constructing a cover identity clean enough to pass Mrs. Park's vetting process. It had taken remarkable patience. Both of them were patient women. Sun Ki saw them together in the garden that afternoon. He had come out through the side terrace and stopped at the balustrade when he saw the 2 women below. Tara seated on the stone bench near the boxwood hedge, Min Hee standing before her. To any observer, it appeared to be exactly what it was positioned to appear as. Min Hee, the new household companion, was making polite, superficial acquaintance with the soon-to-be former wife. She is helping the servant adjust, he told his security chief that evening. What Sun Ki had not been close enough to hear, what the rain beginning to fall on the garden had helpfully obscured, was the actual conversation happening between the 2 women on that bench. The jasmine climbing the estate wall breathed its sweetness around them, and Tara's hands rested in her lap with total stillness, while Min Hee spoke at a volume calibrated for the ears directly in front of her and no others. "The offshore accounts," Min Hee said quietly, her lips barely moving, her expression maintaining the pleasant blankness of a woman discussing decor. 412 million, 3 accounts, 2 jurisdictions. I have the routing numbers, the correspondent banks, and the dormancy schedule. He moves funds on the 3rd Friday of every month. The next window is in 11 days. Tara looked at the hedge. The trust architecture is ready? Filed. The attorney in Zurich processed it yesterday. The moment the transfer executes the conversion, triggers automatically. It will look like a standard inter-account reallocation until he tries to access the funds. Min Hee's voice carried the trace of the smile she was not showing. At which point, it will look like a locked vault with 3 small names on the deed and yours on the key. $412 million, converted into a trust that only the triplets could access, with Tara as sole trustee. Sun Ki would reach for his financial weapon the way he reached for all weapons, with the certainty of a man who had never once had his reach interrupted. And he would find air. He would find that the fortune he had spent 30 years building now technically belonged to 3 boys who could not yet hold their own heads up, managed entirely by the woman he had called Vomit. And the DNA results? Tara asked. Min-hee was quiet for 2 seconds. In 11 years of friendship, Tara had learned that 2 seconds of silence from Amara Collins Cho meant the information was significant enough to require a breath before delivery. The lab confirmed paternity. The boys are his. And the second test, Min-hee exhaled, Sun Kai Park is not the biological son of Chairman Park. The mitochondrial markers are conclusive. Mrs. Park's private liaison, the one she maintained for 3 years before the chairman's death, was a man named Han Sung-woo. He died in 2019. Sun Ki's entire claim to the Park Syndicate, his title, his authority, his inheritance, is built on a lie his mother constructed 40 years ago. The rain came down soft and steady around them. The jasmine leaned in the wet air. Tara closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. When she opened them, they were dry and very clear, the eyes of a woman who has just seen the final piece of a puzzle slide into the only place it could possibly fit. She thought about the syndicate elders, the old men who had run the park organization through 2 generations of leadership, the men whose continued loyalty had always been contingent on their belief in the park bloodline's legitimacy. She thought about what it would mean to present those men with a sealed lab report. She thought about the room going silent. She thought about Mrs. Park's silk hanbok and what collapse looks like when it wears elegant things. When? Min-hee asked. Tara stood. She brushed the rain from her sleeves with 2 precise, unhurried movements. She looked up at the estate, all 4 Georgian floors of it, every camera, every locked door, every room that had been designed to contain her. Soon, she said. She walked back inside. And the estate, for all its marble and its money and its cameras, had absolutely no idea what had just been decided in its own garden. The call came at 7:43 on a Friday morning. Sun Ki was in the shower when his phone began vibrating against the marble vanity with the particular insistence of something that would not be ignored. He pressed it to his ear, and his financial director's voice came through, clipped and airless the way voices sound when the person speaking them is trying very hard not to use the word catastrophic. Sir, a pause, the offshore accounts. Sun Ki went still. The water dripped from his jaw onto the cold floor. What about them? They've been converted, all 3 accounts. The transfer executed this morning at 3 a.m. during the standard dormancy window. It processed as a routine inter-account reallocation. The director stopped, cleared his throat. A trust instrument, registered in Zurich. The beneficiaries are your sons, sir, all 3. The trust is irrevocable, and the sole trustee, the only individual with access or authorization authority is... He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. Sun Ki stood in the steam of his own bathroom, and in those seconds, something shifted in the architecture of his face that no one in his organization had ever seen before. Not rage. Something rawer than rage. The dawning, nauseating recognition that you have been outplayed, not matched, not challenged, outplayed, completely, on a schedule you never knew existed, through a window you never knew was open, by a woman you had called Vomit 3 days after she delivered your children. He called her room. She answered on the second ring, her voice soft and unhurried as a Sunday morning. The voice of a woman who had slept perfectly, whose conscience was completely clear, who had absolutely no idea what he could possibly be calling about. Sun Ki, she said. Just his name, nothing else. He could hear her breathing, steady, even. The breathing of someone who had already won and was simply watching the other player realize it. You have 1 hour, he said. 1 hour to reverse what you've done. I will walk down that hall and I will... You'll what? She said, still soft, still unhurried. The question hung between them like a wire pulled taut, because the answer, the real answer beneath the threat he had been building, was nothing. There was nothing he could do in this house, in this city, in this country that would not now detonate the dossier she held. He had not realized it until this moment, but she had built her architecture so thoroughly around him that every move available to him was a move she had already accounted for. He hung up. Find me a way in, he told his financial director. There has to be a mechanism. A trustee removal clause. A jurisdictional challenge. Something. A very long pause. Sir, I've reviewed the instrument. She had it drafted by Holcomb and Rice. They are the finest trust attorneys in Switzerland. The document is... The director exhaled. Sir, this document is a masterwork. There is no mechanism. There is no clause. She sealed every door. Sun Ki set the phone down on the vanity. He looked at himself in the mirror, jaw set, neck tattoo vivid against his pale skin, silver earring catching the light. He looked like what he was, a man who ran an empire of shadows, who had survived federal investigations and syndicate power struggles, who had never once in 29 years lost a negotiation. He was looking at himself, and he was losing. To a woman in a guest suite down the hall. A woman who had signed his blank papers and smiled and said nothing, and gone back to feeding her children while she did it. He pressed the thought down until it suffocated. Then he dressed and he went to find his mother. Mrs. Park was in the morning room drinking tea with the deliberate composure of someone who had already heard the financial news and was deciding how to position herself. The DNA test, she said before he could speak. I have ordered a private lab test. It will confirm the children's lineage and establish a legal foundation for renegotiating the trust. It will confirm the children are mine, Sun Ki said flatly. We both know that. Mrs. Park's eyes did not waver. It will confirm what we need it to confirm. I have used this laboratory before. The results are, she paused, selecting the word carefully, cooperative. Sun Ki studied his mother. In the morning light in her ivory handbag, she was still formidable. Still the woman who had raised him inside a mythology of Park power and Park blood and Park legacy. He had never once doubted the foundation she had built him on. For the first time, he noticed she had not said the results will be accurate. She had said cooperative. He filed that in the back behind the more immediate fires. Fine, he said. Process it. He left the morning room. He did not know, could not know, that down the hall in the guest suite, Tara's laptop was open. That the jade ring on the morning room shelf had captured every syllable of the conversation. That Tara had been waiting for this precise moment, the moment Mrs. Park would volunteer the DNA test believing it was a weapon, for 6 weeks. She read the transcript of the recording, then she picked up her phone and sent one message to her contact at the private lab. She's calling you today. Let her believe she's in control. Send me the real results the moment they process. 3 seconds later, already waiting. Tara closed the laptop. She looked at the 3 boys sleeping in their portable crib, and she thought about the sealed black envelope. She thought about Han Sung-woo, dead since 2019, whose biological legacy was currently sitting in a forensic database that Mrs. Park did not know existed. She thought about a room full of syndicate elders and the sound 40 years of lies make when they finally hit the floor. Soon, she had told Min-hee in the garden. Soon was tomorrow night. The call came through Sun Ki's private line at 6:30 the following evening. It's 2 hours before the syndicate dinner. It was his head of security. 4 words. The agents are outside. Sun Ki crossed to the window of his 3rd-floor study and looked down at the front drive. 2 black SUVs. 3 men in the particular suits that announced federal employment without needing to say it aloud. One of them was consulting a document. Another was speaking into a radio. Sun Ki's jaw tightened. Ice. Right on schedule. He had activated the contact 4 days ago, a quiet arrangement that would remove Tara from the country before the trust's legal standing could be challenged in a domestic court. Without a U.S.-based trustee, the instrument would be vulnerable. With Tara deported, the whole structure collapsed. He straightened his tie, turned toward the door. His security chief met him in the hallway, and the expression on the man's face was wrong. It was not the composed efficiency of someone managing a planned operation. It was the brittle, over-controlled expression of someone who has just learned that the plan was never the plan. Sir, the chief paused. They're not here for Mrs. Park Williams. Sun Ki stopped. They're here for you. The word moved through Sun Ki's body like something electrical, cold at the entry point and spreading outward with a speed he could not manage or contain. He stood in the hallway of his own estate in a suit his tailor had cut specifically for tonight's dinner, and he felt the entire architecture of everything he had spent 30 years building begin to vibrate at a frequency that meant structural failure. On what grounds? He said. His voice was still controlled. His voice was always still controlled. It was the last thing he had left. The chief produced a document. A federal dossier was submitted to the D.C. field office 10 days ago. Smuggling routes, financial instruments, correspondent banking records, shipping manifests. Sir, whoever compiled this, he shook his head slightly. It reads like it was built by someone who had full access to the operation's internal architecture. Sun Ki took the document. He read the first page, then the second. Then he stopped, because on the second page was a notation that carried a specific customs code, a code that only 3 people in the organization had ever known, and one of those people had spent the last 3 months sleeping 20 feet down the hall from his office. He thought about 14 cameras. He thought about a jade ring he had not touched in weeks. He thought about a woman who had sat in a supervised attorney's meeting and appeared to be absorbing legal terminology. He thought about the smile he had not quite seen on her face when he had found the fake camera and destroyed it. She's watching us. He had been so confident when he said it. The agents knocked. Downstairs, Tara was already dressed. She had chosen her clothes for this evening 2 weeks ago, a deep burgundy wrap dress that moved like water against her dark skin. Simple gold at her ears, her hair down for the first time since the delivery, loose and full around her shoulders. She looked like a woman at rest. She looked like a woman who had nothing to account for and nowhere to be. She walked into the foyer at the precise moment Sun Ki was being escorted toward the front door by 2 federal agents, and he saw her. She was standing at the foot of the staircase, one hand resting lightly on the newel post, watching him with those dark, devastating eyes that had never once, not in the hospital room, not in the nursery, not in any of the moments he had designed to break her, shown him fear. They looked at each other. The air between them was extraordinary, charged with everything that had been done and everything that was being undone, with the full terrible weight of what they had been to each other and what they had cost each other, with the particular intimacy of 2 people who had shared a bed and a war. She said nothing. He said nothing. The agents moved him forward. At the door he stopped, briefly, kneed involuntarily, the way a person stops when the body refuses to accept what the mind already knows. He turned his head. She was still watching. He was walked out of his own front door. The syndicate dinner was in 2 hours. 36 of the organization's most senior figures would arrive at the Georgetown estate expecting a formal dinner hosted by Sun Ki Park. They would find instead Tara, and she had something to show them. The sealed black envelope from the laboratory sat on the dining room table. Beside it, on a portable projector screen Min Hee had installed that afternoon, was a genealogical chart that had taken a forensic DNA specialist 3 weeks to compile. At its center, a name that was not Park, Han Sung-woo. Mrs. Park descended the staircase 20 minutes later. She was dressed in her finest hanbok, deep blue, in silver at the cuffs, the posture of a woman who believed that elegance was a form of power that survived everything. She stopped when she saw the dining room. She stopped when she saw Tara seated at the head of the table, her table, the Park table, with the black envelope open in front of her and 36 pairs of elder eyes turning from the projector screen toward the woman who had just dismantled everything. Mrs. Park's face, that magnificent controlled 40-year performance of a face, finally broke, not in tears, in the kind of stillness that comes after an earthquake when everything that was standing has already fallen and the body has not caught up yet. Tara looked at her. The look was not triumphant. It was something quieter and more permanent, the look of a woman who had carried an enormous weight for a very long time and had finally set it down somewhere it could never be moved from again. "Sit down, Mrs. Park," she said. Her voice was low, melodic, hyper-composed. Mrs. Park sat. The syndicate elders left the Park estate just after 11 p.m. They did not leave the way powerful men usually leave the homes of other powerful men. They left the way people leave a building after a structural assessment has declared it uninhabitable. Quickly, carefully, with the particular silence of those who are already recalculating what their association with the institution has cost them. Tara stood at the window of the second floor and watched the last car pull away. The night was clean and cold, the DC, the sky that particular shade of indigo that it achieves only in the hours between midnight and 2 a.m. She had a glass of water in her hand, not wine, not champagne, just water, cool and plain and honest. She had not celebrated. She was not the kind of woman who celebrated before she was out of range. There were still things to do. Behind her, the estate was quieter than it had ever been. Mrs. Park had been escorted to her private suite by two of the elders' attorneys, men who now technically represented the Syndicate Council's interest and not the Park family's, pending a formal review of her position within the organization. The review would take days. The outcome Tara already knew was not in doubt. She walked to the nursery. The room was exactly as she had arranged it that afternoon. The portable cribs were broken down. The diaper bags, 3 of them, each packed with the precise efficiency of someone who had prepared for this moment across 6 weeks of nights, were lined by the door. The boys were dressed in the warmest onesies she owned, fed and sleeping with the trusting completeness of children who do not yet know that the world has teeth. Min-hee was already in the room when Tara entered. She was kneeling beside the middle crib, adjusting a blanket around Kwame's shoulders with a tenderness that had nothing to do with cover identities and everything to do with who she actually was. The woman who had said, "If you ever need me, I will show up, anywhere, any way." "Ask," she had asked. "The van?" Tara asked. "2 blocks west, plates are clean, the driver is mine." Min-hee stood. "Everything's ready." Tara reached into the diaper bag closest to the door and removed a small plastic bag. Inside it, 6 tracking chips, the ones Sun Ki's security team had implanted in the children's hospital ID bands during the first 24 hours, believing Tara had not noticed. She had noticed on day 2. She had removed them on day 4, replacing them with dummy chips at the identical band positions. She crossed to the waste bin by the door, pressed the adhesive side of each chip to the underside of the bin's rim. Smooth, neat, invisible. If Sun Ki's people ran a trace on these coordinates, they would find a trash can in a Georgetown nursery. They would find nothing else. She lifted Kwame first, settling his warm weight against her chest, feeling the particular way he curved into her like a question that had already been answered. She breathed him in, kept moving. They went out through the garden door, the path that the cameras did not cover between 11:15 and midnight, due to a gap Tara had engineered 3 weeks ago by requesting a motion sensor light be repositioned for the baby's sleep schedule. The night air was cold and sharp and free. The van was exactly where Min-hee had said. The boys were loaded with practiced care. The doors closed with a sound so soft, it was almost not a sound at all. Tara looked back once at the estate. 4 floors of federal Georgian stone and ambition, and 40 years of lies glowing in its own security lights like something that believed it was permanent. She turned away. The van moved into the DC night. At the first intersection, Tara's phone lit up with a notification from the encrypted trust platform. Account access attempted. Denied. 2 minutes later, account access attempted. Denied. Then a third. Sun Ki had made bail. He was trying to get in. Every attempt was being logged by the Zurich attorneys and forwarded automatically to the federal dossier as evidence of ongoing interference with protected custodial assets. Every move was a move she had built a wall around. She looked at Kwame sleeping against the car seat strap with his small fists curled and his amber-flecked eyes closed, completely and catastrophically unaware of the empire his mother had just dismantled while holding him. She thought about Sun Ki's hands shaking when the agents walked him out. She thought about 43 days in a Georgetown guest suite, in a jade cage, in a house that had tried to reduce her to a receipt. She thought about the word purchased, and she had cost them everything. The van crossed the DC line as midnight became 1 a.m. The city fell away behind them. Ahead, the highway opened up long and dark and full of distance, the kind of road that means you have made it past the worst part, and the rest is yours to define. 1 week later, a penthouse in Washington, D.C. The gala occupied the top 2 floors of a building that had been, until 6 months ago, held in a shell corporation connected to the Park family's legitimate holdings. It was now held through a series of transfers the estate attorneys had processed during the chaos of the federal investigation, in a management trust whose administrator was a woman whose name appeared nowhere in the Park family's records and everywhere in the federal dossier's cross-reference section. The room was lit the way only rooms curated for power are lit, warm and amber and directional, the kind of light that makes everything look like it was meant to be exactly where it is. 60 people, the city's most carefully selected 60. Syndicate-adjacent finance, legitimate real estate. Federal oversight figures who had been quietly watching the park operation for years and were now watching something different, watching a reallocation of power so clean and so complete that several of them were still trying to identify exactly when it had happened. They heard her before they saw her. Not her voice. Her arrival, the particular shift in the room's atmosphere that happens when someone enters and the air acknowledges it. A murmur moving through the crowd from the elevator bank, a turning of heads that created a wave. A gradual parting of bodies that seemed less like social courtesy and more like something involuntary. Tara walked through the gap they made. She was in emerald green, a custom-tailored power suit that had been built specifically for this body, this night, this moment. The cut was architectural. The fabric caught the amber light and held it. Her deep brown skin was luminous against it, the strong lines of her jaw and collarbone, and the proud set of her shoulders making her look less like a woman entering a room and more like a woman reclaiming a room that had always been hers and was only now recognizing it. Her hair was up, the precise low arrangement she had always worn for business, with 2 deliberate pieces left loose at her temples. Her earrings were gold, simple, serious, the kind of jewelry worn by someone who has nothing to prove and knows it. She walked toward the center of the room without hesitation or performance, and the 60 people who watched her move had the collective unspoken impression of someone watching a verdict being read by the only person in the room who had already known the outcome. Sun Ki was near the bar. He had been released on bond 2 days after his arrest, his legal team managing a temporary stay while the federal case was being compiled. He saw her at the same moment she saw him. He was thinner. 7 days had done something to the surface of Sun Ki Park that years of organizational pressure had never managed, had etched something around his eyes and at the corners of his jaw that was not age exactly, but was what age becomes when it arrives all at once. Man, he was still beautiful. She noticed that with the same clinical objectivity with which she noticed everything, a fact, filed and not felt, his glass was empty. She walked to him. Not because she needed to, not because there was anything left to negotiate or threaten or deliver. She walked to him because some part of the story required this, required that the woman who had been called Vomit stand in front of the man who had said it and let him see exactly what she had become in the space he had tried to erase her from. She stopped close enough that she could see the specific quality of his stillness, the kind that costs something, the kind maintained through effort rather than ease. He looked at her, all of her, the green suit, the gold, the unhurried certainty in her dark eyes. And he looked at her the way he had looked at her across that Seoul conference table the first time, with something that lived underneath assessment, something he had buried under contempt and called business. She let him look. Then she leaned in slightly, not enough to be interpreted as anything except what it was, a woman closing a distance for the purpose of being clearly heard. "You said I made you vomit, Sun Ki," she said. Her voice was exactly what it had always been, low, melodic, the controlled burn. But look at you now, shaking, broke, without a name that belongs to you, without a seat at any table in this room. My ruined body is currently sitting on the keys to your entire empire. I didn't just carry your children, I carried your tombstone. He opened his mouth. She turned. She did not look back. When she moved through the room toward the bank of elevators, and the 60 people who watched her go had the simultaneous private absolute impression of a door being closed from the other side, the sound of something ending with total unassailable finality. In the elevator, she looked at herself in the mirrored door. Her reflection looked back, the suit, the gold, the stretch marks she knew were there beneath the emerald fabric, the stripes that had mapped her sacrifice across her skin, and that she had stopped grieving and started wearing the way a soldier wears a distinguished service ribbon. Evidence of what she had survived, evidence of what she was made of. Her phone was in her hand. A message had arrived 30 seconds ago from a number she did not have saved. She opened it. A name she recognized, the head of the rival organization that had been circling the Park Empire for years, waiting for the walls to thin enough to approach. The message beneath his name was an offer. A seat at the head of the city's new table, resources, alliance, the future of the operation she now controlled, legitimized, and restructured through partners who understood that power properly managed does not need to hide. Tara read it twice. Then she looked at her reflection one more time. The woman in the mirror who had survived 9 months of calculated betrayal and emerged holding 3 children and $400 million in the quiet dissolution of an empire that had believed she was a vessel. She did not delete the recording of Sun Ki's voice from her phone, the one from the hospital, the one that said vomit. She had kept it for 340 days as fuel, as evidence, as the memory of who she had been when the war began and why it had been worth fighting. She kept it still, not as a wound, as a reminder. Never mistake a queen's sacrifice for her weakness. Her fingers moved to the new message. She typed one word. Accepted. The elevator doors opened onto the DC rooftop where a motorcade was waiting. 3 cars, her children inside the first, Min-hee in the front seat with the calm, unshakable presence of someone who had earned the right to be there. Tara walked toward the car. The city spread out around her in every direction, the monuments lit white against the dark sky, the river catching whatever light the night allowed, the whole enormous breathing machine of Washington in its evening rhythm. Full of secrets and debts and leverage and power and the particular brand of grace that belongs only to those who have survived the thing that was supposed to end them. She got in. The door closed. The motorcade moved. And Tara Park, T-Baby, former forensic strategist, mother of 3, architect of the most elegant revenge the DC underworld had ever failed to see coming, opened her laptop in the back seat, pulled up a new document, and typed a single line at the top of a blank page. Phase 2. Begin. If T-Baby had you holding your breath from beginning to end, drop a T in the comments right now. She earned it. If you think Sun Ki's story is not over, drop an S, because part 2 is already in the works and what comes next will shake this whole table. Hit that subscribe button so you are the first to know when it drops. Share this with your person, the one who loves a story about a woman who outthought everyone in the room while they thought she was broken. Drop your city below. Let me see where T-Baby's army is watching from. Part 2 is coming. Stay ready.